In a previous video article, I discussed the construction, historical context, and reception of a series of pedagogical music theory games developed in 1801 by Anne Young. As I noted, at least one critic complained that these games were too complex for their intended audience. Young responded to such criticism in a music theory treatise that appeared 2 years after her games were first patented. As I discuss in the present video, the ideas proposed in Young's treatise are not only highly original, but also may have arisen, at least partly in response to her unusual position as a female music theorist. In 1803, Anne Young published An Introduction to Music, a theory treatise aimed primarily at young people and their teachers. This work purported to explain the musical fundamentals necessary for playing her musical games. The treatise makes no mention of scientific ideas such as the overtone series, nor of theoretical concepts such as a fundamental bass. Indeed, it eschews any theoretical explanation of the materials it does teach. However, a careful examination of the authorial decisions that Young takes in order to present this simplified account of music theory reveals her keen awareness of and engagement with recent speculative thought. Young's most intriguing intervention arguably pertains to chord function. In the 6th chapter of the treatise, she introduces the concepts of triad, fundamental, chord inversion, and different types of cadences. She also provides the names of nearly all of the scale degrees, with the exception of scale degree 2. Indeed, this proves to be a feature of Young's theory, which ignores, apparently intentionally, the triad built on scale degree 2, and, even more surprisingly, its first inversion, or 2/6, a chord of prominent occurrence in the decades around 1800. That is, Young appears to subsume 2 and 2/6 into her lengthy treatment of the 4/5/3 chord with added major sixth, which for her, as for Rameau, is a paradigmatic form of the subdominant. She applies this approach to the 7th chord built on 2 as well, to the extent that she regards the pitches comprising the root position of what we call 2/7 in major as a third inversion of 4/5/3 with an added sixth. In her own words, this chord therefore may be considered as having two fundamentals, as 2 of its notes have a third and a perfect fifth among its intervals. These are the 4th of the scale, in which the discord is the added sixth, and the 2nd of the scale, in which the discord is an added seventh. To this last, the term subdominant chord has by some authors been appropriated, and it has been called the minor chord of the 7th, as the dominant chord above treated of has been named the major chord of the 7th. Young here implicitly invokes an established theoretical tradition of considering the minor 7th chord as possessing two fundamentals, namely, the notes we call its root and its third. Presumably, she does so in order to justify regarding 2/7 as a kind of subdominant. While the idea that dissonant chords have two fundamentals was first proposed by the Swiss music theorist Jean-Adam Serre in 1753, Young would have certainly encountered it in the writings of the Scottish music theorist John Holden, a major figure in late 18th century British music theory, whose treatments of chords she cites in the preface to her treatise as a model. Not to be confused with the double emploi, Serre's double fundamental is rather a development of Rameau's notion of the cogeneration of minor triads, systematically applied to dissonant chords. However, Young's approach to the minor 7th chord differs from Holden, who regarded the double fundamental as expressing a psychological state of divided attention. Rather, for Young, the 7th chord built on 2 is always a subdominant, regardless of its voicing. In effect, this is a new approach to the very notion of subdominant, in which the term no longer refers to a single scale degree, but rather to a class of chords with what we would today call a predominant quality. There are a number of reasons why Young may have decided to regard scale degree 4, rather than 2, as paradigmatically predominant. The first is practical, and stems from the harmonization of the rule of the octave, where scale degree 4 in the bass is harmonized with either 5/4/3 or 2/6/5, easily regarded as 4 with added sixth, whereas when scale degree 2 is in the bass, it is harmonized with 7/6 or 5/4/3. Theoretical factors may have also been at play, as the diminished quality of the triad built on scale degree 2 in minor may cast doubt on its ability to constitute an ideal category. Perhaps most important, however, is the theoretical convention of regarding 4 and 5 as opposing poles organized around the tonic, an insight which dates to Rameau's Génération harmonique. It appears, therefore, that Young drew on her own extensive knowledge of music theory in order to create an abridged theoretical apparatus for her readers, one that neither entirely reflected the musical practice of the day, nor disclosed its own grounding in earlier traditions of speculative thought. In the following chapter on chord inversion, Young summarizes her new approach to function by proposing that, Perhaps there are few real chords in music which are not either perfect chords or to be referred to the class of dominant or of subdominant chords, although they may be disguised by suspending or altering one or more of the notes. This statement clarifies her treatment of scale degree 2 to a certain extent. It is already a disguised subdominant. Indeed, Young's claim that all triads and seventh chords can in fact be understood as altered members of the tonic, dominant, or subdominant categories strongly suggests an intuition of the central insight of the later theory of harmonic functionalism. This is a significant speculative achievement whose origins lie in an attempt to simplify the principles of music theory in a didactic context. Young's innovative articulation of a kind of early function theory was noticed by the renowned English composer John Wall Callcott in his 1805 review of her treatise. According to Callcott, Young's treatment of chords contained some very important doctrines which we have never seen before so well expressed. He continues, "We are not only heartily inclined to subscribe to this theory, but are convinced by long study and experience that all chords are reducible to the tonic, dominant, or subdominant, with some slight exceptions in the case of sequences and licenses, and even in these, one of the three above mentioned is generally implied, if not decidedly audible." Taken together, Young's idea and Callcott's reformulation reveal how early notions of function theories, those quasi-intermediate theories of harmonic function in the decades between Rameau and Riemann, may have arisen in part out of pedagogical practice. Given these tantalizing suggestions of speculative thought, it seems unfortunate that Young restricted herself only to presenting a practical, pared-down version of music theory, essentially producing a kind of thorough bass manual for playing her games. In my remaining minutes, I would like to explore this point further by considering how Young's status as a female music theorist may have affected the nature of her treatise. From the very start, Young makes a considerable effort to align her work with the domestic world of childcare and to emphatically distance herself from any claim to music theoretical innovation. Both the games and the treatise are dedicated to the 6-year-old Princess Charlotte by permission, burnishing Young's association with the education of upper-class girls. She also emphasizes her own occupation as a teacher in the preface, and, using the third person, relates the following. In conducting the musical education of young ladies, she has ever been anxious to render her own acquaintance with the science more extensive and accurate. In the efforts which she made with this view, she received occasional assistance from one upon whom it had devolved in early life to act towards her the part of a protector and father, as well as of a brother. In this passage, Young gives considerable credit to her brother Walter, perhaps in part in order to dispel fears about the propriety of an unmarried woman overly devoted to music and games. After all, as she rather poignantly confesses, the design of the games had, for some years, employed her most anxious thoughts, and been the most interesting occurrence of her life. Young also goes to great lengths to locate her theoretical writing in the lineage of the aforementioned Holden, the only writer she references by name in her work. She explicitly emphasizes that her treatment of rhythm, chords, and cadences is nearly that of the latent genius Mr. Holden, whose method seems to give the most distinct and connected views of the subject. She also informs readers where his work could be purchased. These propitiatory gestures of placing her work under the auspices of two men seem clearly intended to support Young's defensive strategy of disavowing any claim to theoretical originality. We can also find similar sentiments in Young's extended apology for writing her treatise in the first place. It was only on the recommendation of certain renowned musicians, she writes, that she had even embarked upon such a project, and this only because her games, which may undoubtedly be comprehended and played by children, were often considered by grown persons as intricate and puzzling. Therefore, she continues, she hoped this would serve as an apology for obtruding a work which, so far as it goes, may be considered as a treatise on music, and which, from the number of excellent books upon that subject already published, may to some appear as superfluous. This explanation is consistent with the rhetorical deflections found in the writings of many women of the period, an approach aptly summarized by Mary Wollstonecraft in her own preface to The Female Reader, where she remarks that it is usually considered a breach of modesty for a woman to obtrude her person or talents on the public when necessity does not justify and spur her on. Indeed, this concern may explain another unusual feature of Young's treatise, its heavy reliance on grammatical constructions in the passive voice, many of which appear in conjunction with anonymizing terms such as some authors or some musicians. This rhetorical strategy allows her to preserve the work's streamlined quality, but also enables her to obscure her own contributions. For example, the phrase "some authors" appears twice in her treatise, each time in connection with her own intervention regarding the subdominant nature of scale degree 2. Although Jung's games and treatise were favorably reviewed, the critical response suggests that our author's unspoken anxiety was not unfounded. For example, we may wonder just how to take one anonymous reviewer's description of games designed by a middle-aged spinster as pregnant with scientific instruction. And there can be little doubt as to the snideness of Callcott's remark on the enthusiasm for the games shown by the distinguished cellist John Gunn. In 1803, Gunn moved from London to Edinburgh, where he and Jung were married. In his review, Callcott could not resist observing that Mr. Gunn's flattering encomiums on the scheme were excited by a stronger passion than science alone can impart. Gunn himself subsequently included a disclaimer in his own treatise, asserting that, without ever having previously heard the name of the ingenious and scientific inventor, I was struck with the merits of these games. Thus, while the reviewer, Callcott, and Gunn seem to have readily recognized the value of Jung's work, the reception seems to have been partly affected by the gender of its author. To summarize, Annie Jung's works represent a remarkable achievement in the domains of pedagogical and speculative music theory. Her games reveal an extraordinarily creative mind that sought out new approaches to the joys and challenges of teaching music, and her treatise distills complex insights grounded in speculative music theory into a series of practical lessons that could be easily comprehended by children. In doing so, they join a growing list of alternative modes of music theory, such as the Partimento tradition, in which new speculative insights arise from the pedagogical negotiation between abstract ideas and musical practice. Recovering the content and context of such developments can contribute to our understanding of the intricate relationships between didactic works and speculative thought, while also allowing us to broaden our conception of the figures and traditions involved in the history of music theory.